We welcome you back to the Eagles pregame show here on Philly Sports brought to you by SeatGeek. SeatGeek, the best way to buy your tickets. Make sure you go over there. Use code Philly Sports Report and take $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. The Eagles are basically right next to Sam Heine today, as they take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Eagles are 1 week away from their bye week already, which is crazy. But they take on the Bucs, who they've struggled against the last few years. Sam, how are we?
Doing good, yeah. Unfortunately, the lady had to work. She had a show this weekend, so couldn't get down to the game. But yeah, excited. It should be a good one. The Eagles. It's going to be a tough one for them with all the injuries, but it definitely should be a good game.
Yeah, and if Sam was looking at his tickets on SeatGeek, which you should also be doing with all the tickets that you were purchasing. Yeah, another proponent of the game today. We have a lot to go over. I want to talk about the weather down there because you just had the hurricane over there. Hope all is good with you and everyone you know, but what's it down like at the stadium?
Yeah, luckily in the middle of the state here, like where I am, we didn't really get hit that hard, but the Tampa area definitely got hit. So like you said, hopefully everyone over there is okay. I know a lot of places that my girlfriend and I like to go and visit, on our weekends, it definitely got affected. So hopefully everything's okay over there. I think as far as the game standpoint, the hurricane's really kind of out of here by now. And from everything I've heard from people I've talked to just working that live over in Tampa and all that kind of stuff, everything around the stadium is pretty okay. So from that standpoint, I think it's going to be fine. In terms of, I know some people up in Philly were worried about that the field might be wet. I personally work at a golf course, so our course is fine. So I'm sure the field's going to be fine. But the heat is definitely going to be a big factor. I mean, obviously, I'm wearing a hoodie today, but I have the convenience of being indoors in the air conditioning because it is insanely hot out today. And they're saying it's going to be over 100 degrees at kickoff with the humidity. One thing the hurricane has brought us is Florida's always going to be really humid, but after the hurricane, it is just these last couple of days been insanely humid. I mean, the windows, the doors, all that kind of stuff are just all fogged up everywhere you go. You walk outside and your glasses just get covered in fog. It has been insane, the humidity the hurricane has brought. So they're saying it's going to be over 100 degrees at kickoff, feels like temperature, which, I mean, these Eagles players and even the Tampa players, honestly, because this time of the year, it's normally like mid 80s, not 100. So it's definitely something they're going to have to prepare for and try to work through for sure.
You even see the Buccaneers, they'll be wearing their white uniforms today don't want to wear the darker colors in the heat, which makes sense.
Yeah.
So that'll certainly be
the Eagles are going to be showing a lot of sweat through those green jerseys for sure.
Oh, yeah, they sure will. And maybe they'll need some pickle juice as well. This might be another pickle juice.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. Let's move on to the game itself. Last week, the Eagles got a big win in New Orleans. I think we both picked them to lose. We were both wrong. We'll see how we fare today. I still don't know what's going to happen. But the defense was a big part of it. And the run defense as well, who has been very shocking, very bad the first 2 weeks of the season, came out in New Orleans on 29 rushes, only allowed 89 yards, stopped Alvin Kamara, who has been hot all season. They were awesome last week.
Yeah, I think one of the big things is they came into that game saying, we're not going to let the Saints beat us on the ground. If they're going to beat us, their car has to beat us. And, I mean, that plan worked to a T. I think, obviously Jalen Carter had the game of his career so far, in the NFL. He was just absolutely amazing. And that kind of shows you what everyone sees in him, that talent and that potential that he has to be a future, defensive player of the year type player. In the middle, I think one thing that's been kind of underplayed, and I don't want to take anything away from Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis because they both played really well, but that the Saints center did go out in the beginning of that game. What you want them to do, though, if the center goes out or one of their offensive linemen goes out, you want players with that kind of talent to dominate that backup, and that's exactly what they did. But I just feel like it's worth noting because I feel like a lot of people haven't really been talking about that a lot, that the Saints were missing a very good offensive lineman, but like I said, at the same time, if somebody goes out, you want your stars to dominate that player, and those backup players, they for sure did. It's definitely a formula I think that they can kind of move forward with. Bryce Huff, I mean, it is what it is at this point. Through three games, I think we can say that he just might not have it, what they thought he was going to have. I mean, he was a situational player in New York coming here and now trying to expand his role a little bit, only played 18 snaps last week, and he got sort of benched, as you could say, after a really bad play where he went all the way in on the inside, and Kamara was able to fill his hole right there. So, that's obviously a concern going forward. But I think if the middle of that defense plays well, the secondary, aside from a few CJ misplays on some deep touchdowns, has played really well. Q Mitchell and Darius Slay have had some really good games. So I think it's definitely something that we can kind of build on going forward. And, it's crazy to say, but the defense has outplayed the offense so far this season with the amount of talent the defense has compared to the offense. Obviously, A.J. Brown's been out for a few games now, but the Eagles defense has outplayed the offense, and I think it's something they can build on going forward.
Yeah, it sure is. And Bryce Huff actually came out the other day, since this is all we care about in NFL media. He deleted all his Eagles-related posts on Instagram, removed his Eagles profile picture or whatever. I mean, that has proven a lot to not mean anything, but it also does mean something. And Hassan Reddick came out earlier this week and said that he's open to coming back to the Eagles. Could we see something happen?
I mean, so obviously, you know me. I love Hassan Reddick. He was my favorite player on the team. I would love to have him back. But at the same time, do I think that it'll happen? I don't know. The talk around it with all the Eagles beat reporters was absolutely not. There's no chance that he'll come back. The Eagles have passed that, water under the bridge. The Eagles have, moved on. So now it's starting to be like more and more beat reporters are saying, well, if he takes a pay cut, it's a prorated salary at this point, all this stuff. So I think, you never want to say never. I think it would make a lot of sense for both teams to just say, hey, Hassan's not going to play for you this season. Let's take some protections off your draft picks or whatever and send him back. And, instead of it being a third, it could have been a second, could have been a third. Let's just make it a second round pick, bring him back here and, just cut your losses at this point. I mean, the Eagles obviously need help. As well as the defensive line played last week, that was a lot from the middle. I mean, they were blocking Bryce Huff with a freaking tight end last week, and he couldn't do anything, which is just ridiculous. So, I mean, I think the Eagles are going to definitely have to make a move at edge rusher before the trade deadline is there. Whether that's Hassan Reddick or not remains to be seen. But I think it's more of a possibility now than it was, when Hassan first started kind of holding out.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I want to talk a little bit more about those Bulldogs in the middle, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis last week. I mean, Davis's first 3 years, Carter's first year, we have seen almost nothing from the two of them through their first few seasons in the NFL. And we finally saw them dominate. Last week, they combined for 1 sack, 2 TFLs, 2 pass breakups, and a quarterback hit. Carter specifically impacted on 18 plays and 51 snaps. He was the highest rated defensive tackle of the week. It was so fun to see them dominate, which we've been waiting to see for so long. Will that continue this week? And is that something we need to now expect from the two of them?
Yeah, I think with Jalen Carter, I mean, he set the bar last week, right? We can't expect him to play to that standard every single week because he was the best defensive player in the NFL last week. But I do think that we can expect him to play from this point on, up to that standard. Like I said, he's not going to have that kind of game every single week, but we know it's in there. And if he starts slacking off again, people are going to call him out for it. But I think that Carter can kind of get that as something to roll on. We saw he was really fired up last week. Obviously, he was benched for the first series against the Falcons. So I think he's kind of a guy that works on momentum a little bit. He was really fired up. And I think it also helps him personally just to kind of have that kind of game where you say, okay, I can do this in the NFL and go forward with it. Jordan Davis, I mean, I'm not sold on him. One thing that was obviously really positive is that everyone talks about how, well, he does take up a lot of space in the middle, that he needs to be able to get to the passer in some situations. And he did have that sack last week, which was impressive. So obviously we don't expect him to be a 10 sack guy, but if he can start mixing in a sack, a little bit more here and there. And then if we're gonna knock him when the defensive line gives up a lot of rushing yards because he's supposed to be a run stuffer, even if he's not showing up a lot in the stat sheet, we have to give him credit when the Eagles defensive line does a good job against the run, because he is in there holding up so much space, taking on two guys a lot of the times last week, especially he was getting doubled inside and just allowing other players to have one-on-one matchups to make tackles behind him. It's not a coincidence that Nakobe Dean and Zach Vaughn had a ton of tackles last week, and that's because Jordan Davis is taking up so much space in that middle, allowing those guys to play downhill and hit Alvin Kamara. So I think he had a good game, and I think he just needs to continue off of that and just, add in those pass rush a little bit more, but just not take so many plays off and just take up all those bodies in the middle and allow those guys behind you to make those plays.
Let's move on to the offensive side, where the Eagles are shorthanded by a lot. No A.J. Brown for the third straight week of the hamstring. No Devontae Smith, who got absolutely smashed and got a concussion. How there was no call on that, I don't know. And Lane Johnson is out with a concussion. You saw him vomiting on the sideline after he was concussed, which is very concerning. We've talked about AJ before. Now there's no Devontae Smith, who last year in the playoffs, the Eagles didn't have AJ Brown against the Bucs. Devontae Smith dominated. They no longer have Devontae Smith. And Lane Johnson, your veteran presence on that line, will not be there. Those are two huge losses for this offense.
Yeah, and the Eagles' record without Lane is really bad. We saw that there could have been a possibility that AJ and Lane played, but I saw that they said that Lane didn't pass concussion protocol before the allotted time that they must to play. With a bye next week, you never want to think this, because in the NFL, every game is so important. In the MLB, NBA, if somebody has a lingering injury, it's so easy to just hold them out for one game, especially if you have a day off the next day. I mean, we see it all the time in baseball. Bryce Harper always gets, or whoever gets those days before an off day. With the bye week next week, I think the Eagles are being a little bit on the cautious side here. I think they're saying that we're okay going into the bye and letting them just get that extra week to all get healthy to come out of the bye, because it is such an early bye, and get that stretch all the way down, because we're going to need to stay healthy throughout week 6 through 18 there. It obviously, like you said, is a huge loss, both on the line. And then the Eagles went from having probably the best duo of wide receivers in the NFL week 1 to now week 4 having the worst set of wide receivers in the NFL. It's a good sign, at least, that AJ was practicing on Friday. That shows that he should, knock on wood, be ready after the bye. And then hopefully Smitty and Lane will be able to come out of the protocol. But yeah, the Eagles are going to have to, this is going to be a big Kellen Moore game for sure, trying to get a bunch of guys involved, trying to figure out how to get a bunch of guys open who we didn't really expect to be getting a lot of targets. And I think also, Britton Covey's out. He's out for a little while. And while he hasn't been a great receiver in the NFL so far, he has at least been a little bit involved in this offense. Has been here longer than the guys, has more of a rapport with Jalen than guys like John Ross and Paris Campbell and Johnny Wilson. So, he was a guy that we would have looked to step up this week that also is going to be out. So it's definitely thin over there in the wide receiver room, and it's going to take a lot for the Eagles to win this game offensively.
Yeah, it feels a little 2019-esque, where the best wide receiver on the team was Greg Ward.
Yeah.
Which was, Eagles still somehow made the playoffs that year. That was crazy. Eagles elevated Paris Campbell and John Ross for this game from their practice squad. Who you have Jahan Dotson, who has done nothing, as your wide receiver 1 today. Who else are you going to roll with?
Yeah, the answer is Saquon Barkley and Dallas Goedert. It is the wide receiver, from the wide receiver standpoint. I just don't know how you can trust anyone besides Dotson. I don't even really trust him that much. He hasn't shown that much. At least he's shown stuff in the NFL, and I guess Paris Campbell, because even though he was cut, he was going to make the team if he didn't get hurt, and then he did get hurt, and the Eagles traded for Jahan Dotson. So, I mean, and he is, he's had a long career in the NFL, so I guess you trust him a little bit to at least just know his routes get open. But I think it's going to take a lot of creativity from Kellen Moore. I think they're going to have to run a lot of 12 personnel with 2 tight ends. I would like to see them run some two running back sets as well. Kind of have maybe Shipley or Kenny Gainwell in the backfield with Saquon out as wide receiver, or Kenny Gainwell out as a wide receiver because he's a good receiving running back. I think it's just going to take a lot of creativity, and hopefully Jahan Dotson. A lot of people gave him a pass in the beginning of the season because he was traded for so late that he wasn't really up to speed in the offense. Well, it's week 4. He's been here for over a month. That excuse is no more. So, hopefully he can step up today. And he made a good play last week where he baited those guys into running into each other. But besides that, he hasn't done too much. So.
Yeah, you mentioned Saquon and Dallas Goedert. What a week they had last week. Saquon continues to impress. 17 carries of 147 yards, had a 65-yard rushing touchdown, which was crazy. And Dallas Goedert kind of sealed the game for them. 10 receptions, 170 yards, 61-yard catch at the end where he got down the field to sneak Saquon in. They were awesome. Dallas Goedert, we have not seen involved in his offense in like 3 years, and came back and just had the best game of his career. I mean, we're going to see a lot of Dallas again. We're going to obviously see a lot of Saquon, hopefully for the rest of the year. And Saquon didn't get any carries until a little bit into the second quarter.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, they're going to have to rely on them again, and got to hope they come through again, which it certainly looks like they will.
Yeah, I mean, Saquon has been everything we could have hoped and dreamed of so far this season. I mean, for all the people who think that running backs grow on trees, and while they may be true, running backs that are this special, they do not grow on trees. And he is showing so far that, he has his fastest sprint speed on that touchdown since his rookie year. I mean, he just, the fear and the threat that he puts into a defense. I mean, there's guys that hit that hole that he had for that 65-yard touchdown. They gained 20 because the offensive line did a great job. So there's only a few guys in the NFL that can be even with cornerbacks and outrun them for a touchdown. I mean, he has just been everything we could have dreamed of. And I think this is something we'll talk about when we talk about Jalen, but I think one of the things, too, of why the Eagles have improved on the blitz this season is because of Saquon. I think something that's been really underrated that hasn't been talked about Saquon is how well he's picked up blitzes this year. I mean, he, for one, is just a massive person. I mean, everyone knows the whole Saquon jokes and all that stuff, but if you go back and watch the Saints game and see when they brought pressure a little bit, he gets down low and just levels guys as they are coming for Jalen. And it is, so I think that's, he's been amazing from that standpoint. And then going to Goddard, when we needed him to step up, he did. And that's, a great sign, and hopefully a great sign for what's coming in today. AJ out, Smitty gets hurt. You're the guy, Dallas. You got to step up. And to his credit, I mean, he was fantastic. If Jalen, if Jalen had his eyes, moving around a little bit more, going through his progressions, he probably would have had a deep touchdown too, because he absolutely smoked that guy, and he was wide open running down the field. Jalen just missed him. He was fantastic, and it's obviously going to be a little bit harder today because they're going to be game planning. I mean, Todd Bowles knows we only got Dallas and Saquon, so he's going to be ready for him. But I think they're talented enough to definitely have another few big games today.
Hope they do. And let's look at, like you mentioned, Jalen. He's going against the good old Todd Bowles blitz, which has been a big problem for him every time he has faced it. In his career, he's 52 for 85 against it, 566 yards, 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and has been sacked 4 times. How will Hurts and Kellen Moore handle it today?
Yeah, Todd Bowles has been Jalen Hurts' kryptonite in his career, really. I mean, the 2 lowest points, I think, in Jalen's career have both come in Tampa against the Buccaneers, the playoff game his rookie year, when he was just horrible. And, he was horrible, and they were saying he can't read defenses. And obviously last year he was horrible again in that playoff game. I think one thing that's really interesting is that last year the Eagles really struggled, and Jalen really struggled, particularly against the blitz. Well, I guess the Eagles as a whole, because the offensive line struggled as well. When teams brought 6 on pressure, typical blitz is 5 because 4-man pressure is normal, and then a blitz is 5. So teams, when they were bringing that extra man, the 6th man, the Eagles really struggled, and they have not seen a lot of it so far this season. They have really done a great job, and Jalen particularly has really done a great job of recognizing the blitz pre-snap. That's something that's been talked about a lot, that is on him this year because Cam Jurgens is new to his position, and Kelsey would handle it last year. That now that's Jalen's responsibility, and he has done a fantastic job at it so far this season, and it's an area that he has really improved at. But that has been a lot of 5-man pressure. The Buccaneers, they're 3rd in the league, or 4th in the league in blitzing this year. They were 3rd in the league in blitzing last year. They're going to bring 6-man pressures at him all day long. They're going to bring new looks that he hasn't seen before, and it's definitely going to be the biggest test so far for Jalen this season in terms of how well he's adjusted to being the adjuster at line of scrimmage with blitz protection, and staying in the pocket, trusting his offensive line, and finding his hot reads, finding those wide receivers open. And like you said, I do think it is on Kellen Moore a lot too, because while Jalen has improved so far this season, it is still a worry of a lot of people, for Eagles fans, that Jalen still is going to struggle with the blitz, including me. I'm worried that Jalen's going to struggle today. So Kellen Moore needs to dial up plays and offenses and talk to the wide receivers about making sure that they're ready for the ball to come out hot, make sure that there's a running back there to catch the screen, make sure that there's a running back also there to, like I was saying with Saquon, pick up that extra blitzer, because we know Todd Bowles is going to bring stuff that they haven't seen before and they're not prepared for. So it's on both of them to get it figured out today.
Certainly hope so, because it could get ugly if Hurts isn't able to figure it out.
So it looks like he may have dropped off here.
I pressed the wrong button on the mouse and I got kicked from the thing. But yeah, I mean, this could be the decider with Jalen for this game.
Yeah, and I think too, last year we kind of saw the Patriots put out a blueprint in the first game of how to defend the Eagles offense. And then I think today this could be a blueprint on how to defend the new Eagles offense with Kellen Moore. If Tampa is successful with it, I mean, it's definitely going to be a big game for Jalen. Obviously he hasn't played that great in terms of turning the ball over. I mean, the stats that's been going around all week and a lot during the game was that he leads the NFL in turnovers since last season with 26 turnovers in just 21 games, which obviously is very bad and needs to get cleaned up. So I think, going into this year, that has gotten cleaned up. And, even though it is some new plays, Tampa, they're going to come out with a bunch of new looks. And if Jalen's able to, like I said before, he's been a lot better with the blitz this year. If they're able to pick it up, they're able to dissect it, they're able to get some hot reads, some running back screens, that kind of thing, keep the offense moving. It could be good for the Eagles going forward, because there might not be that blueprint on how to stop them with the blitz. But another thing too, you've seen some teams so far this season kind of go away from the blitz because they've been doing such a good job with it. We saw in week 1 with the Packers, they blitzed a lot in the first half. Eagles picked it up really well. They kind of stopped doing it. So if teams see that, Todd Bowles, the master of the blitz right now in the NFL, if he's not doing a good job with the blitz, some teams might not want to do it as much going forward. But if they're successful with it, if the teams behind them are just going to keep coming with it until they get it figured out.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. And quickly want to touch on this. A lot of debate around the city of Philadelphia with Mr. Nick Sirianni and his decision-making on 4th down. There were 2 of them last week. There's been multiple of them this season already that have costed the Eagles a game, almost costed the Eagles a game. Those 2 4th down calls in New Orleans. Agree or disagree?
Disagree. I mean, the one at the end of the first half just made no sense at all. I mean, I get what they're doing, right? Last year against Washington, they ran the exact same play in the same yardage area. DeAndre Swift ran in for a touchdown, but there's tape on that, so teams are going to be prepared for it. And let's just say the chance of getting a touchdown are, I don't know, 20%. I mean, the chance that he runs 25 yards for a touchdown or whatever, and then you have to call a timeout to just kick a field goal again. It just didn't really make any sense. I mean, even the analytics, with the Eagles are a highly analytical driven organization, said to kick the field goal. And then the one later in the game, I didn't like it. And then the one that I thought they should have gone for it when Jake Elliott missed a 60-yard field goal. I mean, obviously we've seen him make that field goal before, but a 60-yard field goal is still a 60-yard field goal. I would have liked to see them go for it there. He just has not had a good feel for these kind of things so far this season. I think because a lot of the talk has been, what does Nick do, right? The parts of the game that he does have impact, he's trying to make so much of an impact that it's just backfiring on him. You just need to stick with what worked before, stick to the analytics. If it says go for it, go for it. But also you need to have feel for the game. Analytics don't take into account feel for the game. It's just strictly numbers. And I think one thing that we saw in the Super Bowl year was all the way up into the Super Bowl, he was doing a great job at it. He had a great feel for the game. His fourth down calls were great. And then in the Super Bowl, in the biggest moment, he just stopped doing what he was doing all year, and he reverted to this. And it's definitely a concern going forward for sure. And I think sometimes he just overthinks it. I think in that Super Bowl he overthought it a lot, and I think right now he's overthinking it a lot as well.
Yeah, so I wrote about it pretty heavily that Eagles. I feel like the Eagles are getting sabotaged from the top. Like the roster is so good, but feels like they're kind of being held back a little bit by some of the coaching from Nick Sirianni, which is like my biggest concern. Of any positives from last week get completely destroyed when the talent is being held hostage a little bit by Sirianni. Like, that's really concerning.
Yeah, I mean, so far the two biggest worries with this team are head coach and quarterback, which are the two most important parts of the team. So it's like there's a lot of positives with this team, a lot of talent on this team, but if you have questions with the head coach and you have a quarterback with a turnover problem and some questions there, it's too early. We all hope the season goes well, but if you look back at the end of the season and say, man, this team had so much talent, what went wrong? I mean, unfortunately, probably where you're going to have to look at.
Yeah, and let's look over to the other side. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're coming off a 26-7 loss to Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos last week in Tampa. The Bucs, they beat Detroit. They got a win week 1, but tough one last week for Baker Mayfield and the Bucs. They had two guys who were questionable. I don't remember who it was. I'm going to look it up, though. They are both playing. Is it a bounce-back game for the Bucs today?
Yeah, so I think the Bucs as a team are more on the average side. I think last week kind of made up for the game against Detroit because Detroit significantly outgained them, but the Bucs won, so that was kind of a weird game. And then coming home and getting destroyed by Bo Nix and the Broncos is definitely not something that they are happy about. I do think that it has the possibility of being a bounce-back game, but I think something so far in the NFL season that we've seen is that week to week is so different. So I'm not really sure if there's going to be a lot of momentum. But at the same time, the Saints have been playing really well. Obviously, we beat them last week, but they're still looking like they could have a good season. So obviously, they need to kind of keep track in their division. So they're definitely going to want to try to get this game and going to be a little bit extra motivated with the Eagles coming back, trying to show them last year's playoff game wasn't a fluke.
Yeah, so for the Bucs, it was Rashad White and Bucky Irving, who were both questionable. White had food poisoning. Irving had a hamstring injury. They are both listed as questionable, but they are both going to play today against the Eagles, per Adam Schefter, and they were not on the inactive list, so they're playing. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty of our pregame show, Sam's notable matchups. Sam, you got 2 for us this week. What do we got for our notable matchups?
All right. So for the 2, first time I think I've ever done this, but I'm going Jalen Hurts versus a head coach. Jalen Hurts versus Todd Bowles. We talked about it a lot when we talked about Jalen, but Todd Bowles has had Jalen's number so far in his career. The Eagles did, another point that's been under talked about is that the Eagles did go down and win last year in Tampa. They blew them out, but for the majority of Jalen's career, Todd Bowles has had his number sending blitzes and has just really done a really good job against Jalen Hurts as a total. So I think that that's definitely a matchup to watch today, and especially with the amount of talent that's down on offense. And then coming to that talent that's down on offense, Saquon Barkley versus Vita Vea. Vita Vea is probably the best old school, typical nose tackle in the NFL. He was battling an injury, but is going to play. He's a big guy in the middle, and he's kind of what we hope that Jordan Davis can turn into. If the Eagles have any shot of winning this game, Saquon Barkley needs to have another monster performance. The Eagles are definitely going to give him the ball a lot, but the Buccaneers know that they're going to be ready for him. So if Vita Vea is having a really good game against Saquon, it could be a long day for the Eagles offense. But on the flip side, if Saquon is really running the ball down their throats and getting into the second and third levels of their defense, the Eagles might have a chance.
Might have a chance. I don't like that. Might have a chance. I don't like that at all. The SeatGeek standout stars. Very quickly, SeatGeek is the easiest and most efficient way to buy your tickets. Each seat is given a green, red, wrong side, red or yellow dot, indicating whether the purchasing the ticket is a good, bad, or fair deal. By using code Philly Sports Report, you save $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Again, PHILLYSPORT. SREP. All right, whatever. It's right there on the screen. You save $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring the show. As always, Sam, SeatGeek standout stars of the game. Who will they be?
I have 2. My first one, I'm going Brandon Graham. One thing that we haven't talked about is that the Buccaneers offensive line has been really, really bad this year. Last week against the Broncos, they allowed 7 sacks. Aiden Hutchinson, even though the Detroit Lions lost that game, Aiden Hutchinson, I forget the exact number of sacks. I looked it up, but I'm forgetting it. But whatever it was an extreme number of sacks for a single game. He was incredible in that game. So I think that Brandon Graham, he's played really well so far this season in his limited snaps. I think he gets the first sack by an edge rusher so far this season. Baker Mayfield holds on to the ball just about as long as any other quarterback in the NFL except for Jalen. So he's prone to taking sacks, and I think Brandon Graham is going to get one. And then, unfortunately, I've talked about him a lot today, but I think Todd Bowles is going to be a standout star of this game. I really love what he does on the defensive side of the ball. I think that with AJ and Smitty out, I think it's going to be a lot of forcing Jalen to beat them. And with the weapons that are out, I'm not 100% confident that he'll be able to do that with his arm. I'm not saying that he won't be able to do it if he's able to run, if they're able to run the ball, and if he's able to get Dallas Goedert involved. But if the Bucs do a good job of limiting Goedert, limiting Saquon, and keeping Jalen inside the pocket, I am concerned that they won't be able to throw their way to a victory today with a lot of those players out. So I think Todd Bowles is going to have a good game plan, and I think, unfortunately, we're going to be saying his name a lot over the next week of why the Eagles could potentially lose this game.
All right. Well, hopefully that doesn't happen, but it may. It seems to happen every time the Eagles go to Tampa. Yeah. The Gamblers, thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring. The Gamblers are us locks of the game. The Eagles are -2.5 today. Will they cover? Also, the over-under is 46.5.
So the line is actually moved. I checked it right before we hopped on. It has moved to Eagles -1. I think that has to do with Lane Johnson being out. I think a lot of money after that kind of came out. A lot of money went on the Buccaneers, so that moved the line to Eagles -1. I have the Bucs with the points there. I like the under for this game. I think that we'll get to it in one of my keys of the game, but I think the Eagles are going to try to slow this game down and really try to win the time of possession. So I think it might be kind of a lower scoring game. And then I like Saquon to score a touchdown. Obviously, had one last week, had one week 1, and almost had one week 2, except he was about 6 inches short. So let's keep riding that. And then CJGJ has given up a lot of touchdowns so far this season. I think that the Buccaneers are going to try to get Chris Godwin on a matchup with him. And I think, unfortunately, Godwin, anytime touchdown, I like that as well.
Sam's Foco Fit Check. Real fans need the best gear. That's why Foco makes legendary gear for the most legendary fans. Click the link in the description to save 10% off any order. Sam, you got a special one for us this week.
Yeah, for the first time ever for the Foco Fit Check, I'm not wearing an Eagles jersey. That is because thanks to the great people over at Foco, they were nice enough to send me a pair of their new Eagles short overalls. We got the Kelly green ones here. You got the shorts on. Obviously hot here in Florida, so the short overalls work really well. I'll give you another look at that. Yes, the shortles. You got the Kelly green with the nice big Kelly green bird right there. Matches all the Kelly green gear perfectly. You got the nice Kelly green hat to match. Shout out to the people at Foco for hooking me up with these. I hope over Christmas break and trying to go to a game when I'm home, we'll definitely be breaking these out. And then I was saying to them before the game, hoping to go to a Phillies playoff game, breaking out the Phillies ones as well. So definitely shout out to the people at Foco. And first time ever not wearing a jersey, but gotta rock the great overalls.
Hopefully it brings the shortles. Hopefully it brings some luck. They're looking good.
Yeah, they're nice.
What was I gonna say? Oh, Garrett Stubbs. He was talking about the other night. Like, what did he say? Like he said something about the shortles. How they got good something. It's gonna like good cartage. Something.
Yeah, they got nice pockets on them. I don't know if that's what he was talking about, but they got good pockets here. You got the beer, the Garrett Stubbs beer pocket right there.
Yeah, because he's talking about how many beers he can hold in his shortles.
Yeah, exactly. You got the Garrett Stubbs beer pockets right here if you need them. But for my purposes, I was gonna go with the stubby look and just not wear a shirt underneath, but I decided that might be a little inappropriate, so that's why we threw on the hoodie real quick.
All right, let's move on. Thank you, Siki. Don't break the shortles now.
Yeah, it looks like they came apart a little bit. I'll have to get that fixed.
Oh my God. All right, well, now you're really going Garrett Stubbs if you're showing out everything. All right, keys to the game. These don't have a sponsor, but if anyone wants to sponsor these, you can. What are the keys to the game for the Birds today?
All right, I got 2 keys if the Eagles are going to win this game. My first one I talked about a little bit with the spread and the over-under. I think if the Eagles are going to win this game, they're going to have to win the time of possession. They're going to need to run the ball. They're going to need to play a lot of short passes with the blitz to try to beat the blitz. So hold and win the time of possession battle. Make this a short game with low scoring, and I think the Eagles can pull it out if they do that. Another thing, we haven't talked about it so far today. It's been the talk of the town for the last 4 weeks, and Jalen Hurts turnovers. I feel like it's just a recurring key until it gets fixed. But today I'm going to change it up a little bit. Instead of Jalen not turning the ball over, win the turnover battle. At this point, last 21 games, Jalen has 26 turnovers. It's just fair to assume that there's at least going to be one turnover so far this one turnover this game. And, that might not even be Jalen. It could be somebody else because those happen as well. But, I feel like the Eagles are going to turn the ball over at least once. The defense, while they do have the 2 turnovers with Reed Blankenship, I would like to see one of the outside corners get a turnover. Q Mitchell, he's been really close. He could have had one last week if he just put that other paw up, but he decided to swat it down like a volleyball player. But he could have had a pick 6 last week. So I think the Eagles defense, Baker Mayfield, like I kind of talked about with Brandon Graham, he holds on to the ball for so long, and that if he gets off his spot, he's prone to turnovers. If he's sitting back there in the pocket with no pressure, he'll pick you apart. But as soon as you get him moving, as soon as you get him sliding out of the pocket, that's when turnovers can happen, whether that's a strip sack fumble, whether that's an interception. So I think the Eagles defense needs to come up with some turnovers today and win the turnover battle.
Some news on Lane Johnson. He told Jay Glazer that he was cleared and good to go to play today, but doctors decided they wanted to play it safe, and my phone just turned off. Play it safe and have him wait to get back to action. So Lane could have played today, but
I don't like that.
You got to listen to your doctors. They know best.
Yeah, I mean, if the doctors are telling him he shouldn't play, but if he's cleared from concussion protocol, then I don't see why there shouldn't be any reason for him to play. But like I said, I felt like they were doing the same thing with AJ a little bit. I don't know if you saw the post he posted on Instagram today, where there's a guy underwater just kind of screaming. So maybe they're having the same approach with him, where with the bye week coming up next week, they're going to try to play it safe. But it sucks. Obviously, hopefully they're doing all right, and I guess we'll see Lane when we come back from the bye.
Yeah, I guess so. Since Lane Johnson's rookie season in 2013, the Eagles are 97, 59-1. In 157 games he has played, including the playoffs, that's a winning percentage of .621. In the 37 games without Lane, the Eagles are 14-23 with a win percentage of .378. Sam, let's get into our predictions. Will the Eagles be 15-23 without Lane, or 14-24?
When Lane Johnson is up for the Hall of Fame, they should just put that stat up there, and that should be the only thing that people should have to know about when they vote for him, is that stat right there. My Eagles prediction for the game, unfortunately, I do think that with the Tampa's defense, and with just honestly the amount of injuries the Eagles have on offense, that they won't be able to score enough points today. I think the Eagles defense has another good game, holding the Bucs to just 23 points. But I don't think the Eagles are going to be able to score that much. I have the Eagles losing today, 23-17. Hopefully, I'm wrong like last week, though. So
yeah, hopefully we're both wrong, because I also have the Eagles losing this game. But I saw your score prediction on my thing, and I was like, "Dang, that was what I was going to say." So I'm also going to ride 23-17. I don't think you get much. I think that's a pretty good score to put out there. I couldn't come up with anything better. All right. It is 1:00. It is game time for the Eagles. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. I guess listening to the show. Thank you, SeatGeek and Foco, for sponsoring. Thank you, SeatGeek. Go get all your tickets to SeatGeek. Foco, be like Sam and wear your overalls, your shortals, or whatever they got over there. Thank you, everyone, for sponsoring. PhillySportsReports.com postgame recap it tomorrow for my takeaways. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Go Birds!
Go Birds.